6 zombies you probably think you could beat. We're testing them on 4 criteria: deadliness, numbers, infection rate, and weaknesses. By the end, you won't just know which zombies look easy to handle, you'll know which ones could turn even a tiny outbreak into a global collapse, and why humanity would have almost no time to react. Some break with a single hit, others burn out fast, but a few come built with mechanics that guarantee the end game. So let's start small, with zombies that seem weakest, and yet can drown civilization in sheer numbers. The Walking Dead shows what happens when fragility hides an unstoppable threat. A single walker is pathetic on its own, limping forward, rotting flesh peeling, fingers grasping without coordination. You could take it down with the most basic tool at hand, and almost anyone could survive a one-on-one encounter. That illusion of weakness is what makes them so deceptive. They are easy to kill, but never easy to escape. The real danger isn't in the fight, it's in the rules of the world. In that universe, most people already carry a dormant strain of the infection. Bites still kill through lethal infection, but the bigger factor is this: anyone who dies in any way reanimates unless their brain is destroyed. Instead of shrinking through normal mortality, the human population keeps feeding the enemy automatically. With modern medicine gone, every death is another recruit on the other side. The scale of that problem becomes clear fast. A handful of walkers isn't an issue, but once the ratio tips into thousands against a single survivor, survival becomes mathematically impossible. In the franchise, walkers eventually outnumber humans by staggering margins. Some fictional tallies estimate as high as 5,000 to 1. The weapon or strategy you choose stops mattering when you face a tide that never needs rest, never starves, and keeps rising with every death. Armies run out of ammunition, fuel runs dry, and even the strongest fortifications crack under constant pressure. Think of it this way: swatting one mosquito is nothing. Facing a swamp filled with swarms of them is survival suicide. That's the core of The Walking Dead. Individually weak, but collectively unstoppable. What feels like an easy opponent becomes inevitable doom as numbers scale out of human control. And if you thought at least they'd remain slow, the appearance of variance ends that assumption. Climbers that can scale walls or burners that fight through flames erase the one advantage survivors could rely on. Weakness doesn't stay static, and what began as something easy to crush turns into a hazard from every direction. When you weigh the walkers against our 4 criteria, the picture is clear. Their deadliness is low and their fragility undeniable, but they score high in infection and overwhelming numbers. The problem is that their weaknesses, slow speed, clumsy attacks, and vulnerability to basic weapons, make them ultimately manageable compared to everything else on this list. They're terrifying in scale, but not in design. For that reason, the walkers earn a spot in the tier F. So which is more dangerous, a single headshot or 1,000 heads? The answer isn't the bullet, it's the clock. And the next threat on our list shortens that clock in a terrifying new way. What if survival didn't come down to a fight at all? What if breathing itself turned fatal? That's the terror of The Last of Us, where a mutated cordyceps fungus rewrites the rules. Infections begin with runners, humans still fresh but violent, attacking with frantic speed. Hours or days later, the fungus forces bone and tissue outward, shaping stalkers that hunt with ambush tactics. Then come clickers, blinded by growths but guided by echolocation, their shrieks sweeping dark hallways for prey. At the far end of the scale, armored giants whose spores and corrosive clouds weaponize the environment itself. The teeth and claws are terrifying enough, yet the deadlier threat lingers in visibility in the air. When an infected corpse decays, it releases spores that fill enclosed spaces. Inhaling them could cause breathing difficulty and sluggish movement within minutes in spore-dense areas. You don't notice until infection is already advancing, and a safe room can turn into a death trap as spores collect and spread. That's why masks become essential equipment in the story. Survivors use them constantly, but gear is finite. Filters and supplies eventually run out. Masks help, but they never guarantee safety. The danger is consistent with how real fungi behave. Background research shows that spores and fruiting bodies thrive in damp, enclosed spaces with poor circulation. That means subways, bunkers, or basements, the very places people think might shield them, act instead as incubators where infection reaches full strength. Imagine being cornered by clickers in a subway tunnel. They remain still until a sound betrays you, exploding forward the moment you slip. They don't simply chase, you stumble into them, as if triggering a hidden explosive. The structure of cities themselves conspires against survival. And there is no fallback strategy. Containment isn't possible when every stage of infection builds towards something stronger. Even defeating a bloater risks spreading more spores into the air. Every battle plants the seeds for another. In all of that destruction, only one known human, Ellie, shows any real immunity, which means sheltering and resisting can't scale to save an entire population. For humanity, exposure is inevitable. Cordyceps pushes survival into nightmare territory. The infection rate is through the roof. Air itself becomes lethal, and its escalating stages only add to the horror. Deadliness stays high across all forms, while weaknesses are minimal, limited mostly to resource scarcity and rare immunity. Numbers don't explode as fast as some universes, but the intensity of infection compensates. Altogether, The Last of Us falls squarely into Tier A. If walkers were about strength in numbers, Cordyceps is about stripping away safety wherever you stand. It makes air hostile, shelter unreliable, and time itself the enemy, which leads us to another world where survival isn't about what's in the air, but how long the sun stays in the sky. In Dying Light, survival follows the rise and fall of the sun. By day, the infected wander sluggishly, slowed by both sunlight and ultraviolet exposure. They're still unpredictable and dangerous in numbers, but with patience and spacing, you can plan every move. Their lunges are clumsy, their speed limited. You can skirt past them or pick them off one at a time. Daylight grants a fragile sense of control, but when it fades, ordinary infected no longer matter. Night unleashes the volatiles, predators with strength, speed, and agility that make the entire city their hunting ground. They leap walls, climb after you, and erase distance in seconds. Fights become unwinnable. The only real option is escape. That shifts how you think about time. Every scavenging run, every delivery, every medical trip has to fit into daylight hours. Imagine planning every errand within a shrinking window. That's a horror writers love and gamers live in. Because once night falls, the street don't belong to you anymore. And volatiles aren't the only danger. Screamers use sound to summon hordes instantly. Demolishers turn combat into a contest of survival against sheer force, tossing aside cars and defenses like toys. The variety of infected ensures that even the daytime never feels safe. Nature has its parallels. Many predators grow bolder after dark when prey loses the advantage of sight. Dying Light magnifies that imbalance to terrifying extremes. A bite during the day may be avoidable. A volatile at night is closer to being stalked by a pack of lions, only faster and on rooftops. The fiction ties survival directly into light. Safe houses, electric barriers, and artificial UV lamps matter. Lose the grid, let blackout spread, and every so-called sanctuary shrinks until only the strongest glow remains. The designers even included mechanics to skip the night entirely, underlining how crucial daylight is to survival itself. Weapons don't provide certainty either. Melee arms degrade, repairs consume rare parts, and the resources never stretch far enough once darkness demands constant retreat. Civilization couldn't sustain a rhythm dictated by 12-hour cycles of hiding and waiting. Humanity's instincts collapse in a world where night erases every strategy. These infected play a dangerous game of rhythm. By day, they're weaker, clumsy, and containable. But once the sun sets, the volatiles turn survival into a sprint for your life. Their deadliness skyrockets at night, their infection spreads steadily, and their numbers never truly dwindle. Still, their dependence on darkness and UV light gives survivors a narrow window of safety, a weakness not shared by stronger foes. That puts the Dying Light infected in Tier B. But what happens when the threat doesn't just get stronger with darkness, but begins from something microscopic, multiplying until even planets fall. One parasite, one host, then an entire world. That is the scale of the flood in Halo. At first it looks small, an infection form no larger than a bulb, skittering across the ground toward any sentient host. But once it latches on, it burrows in, rewrites tissue, and takes full control. Hosts are twisted into combat forms, able to wield weapons or batter through defenses. Others are reshaped into incubators, producing still more infection forms. No loss stays silent. Every fallen body becomes new biomass, another piece of an army that never stops growing. What makes the flood more than just swarming parasites is what comes next. The countless bodies and flesh eventually consolidate into hierarchy and intellect. The grave mind emerges, a hive intelligence with access to every memory, tactic, and instinct of the absorbed. Overnight, chaos becomes calculated. Battles evolve into ambushes and coordinated strikes executed by an enemy that thinks with the mind of your own soldiers. Fighting the flood is less like a battlefield and more like battling a planet-sized brain that learns faster than you can counter it. The natural world gives us a glimpse of this kind of devastation. Invasive species introduced without predators often spiral unchecked. Rabbits in Australia destroyed landscapes within mere decades. That's a single mammal on one continent. The flood magnifies that dynamic across whole planets. Spore to host, host to army, army to grave mind, each phase accelerating the collapse at exponential scale. It isn't just ecological failure, it's military obliteration, and the usual defenses crumble instantly. Quarantine only delays because one breach is all it takes. Firepower loses meaning, since every corpse on the ground is more raw material for the flood to reclaim. Even allies you just fought beside can be seen again minutes later, charging at you as unwilling extensions of the parasite. In Halo lore, the Forerunners studied this cycle and drew their only conclusion. Once liberated, the flood could not be contained. The sole lasting countermeasure was extinction, so they created the Halo rings, weapons designed to wipe out every sentient species in the galaxy, starving the flood by eliminating its food source. The flood is the definition of exponential doom. Their deadliness, numbers, and infection rate all max out, and the only real weakness is that they need sentient hosts. But when those are in abundance, nothing stops them. From spores to grave mind, they represent total collapse on a galactic scale. Against such inevitability, no world stands a chance. The flood is firmly placed in Tier S. If a single breach is that bad, how early would humanity need to act? The fiction answers with a brutal binary: instant eradication or extinction. But the scenario raises a more disturbing question. What happens when extinction is not a byproduct of nature's cruelty, but the very goal of human design? Resident Evil shifts the battlefield from natural infection to intentional design, introducing bioorganic weapons, creatures engineered from the start to be stronger, faster, and more durable than humanity could ever withstand. These aren't the weak corpses stumbling through alleys. These are purpose-built, military-grade bioweapons, crafted as tools of war and control. Tyrants, Nemesis, the Ouroboros all stand as towering reminders of what happens when science pushes past survival into weaponization. What separates BOWs from ordinary infected is durability. A regular zombie body decays and collapses under stress. BOWs instead adapt, regenerate, and persist. Consider the Tyrant T-00 or Mr. X. Engineered to hunt down targets, it not only resists most attacks, but also displays limited intelligence, processing its environment and engaging with relentless focus. Nemesis takes that design further, integrating the ability to learn and wield weapons in battle. Suddenly, survival isn't about blocking a door, it's about being hunted by an apex predator that was designed with your defeat in mind. The G-Virus highlights the darkest edge of this design philosophy. Victims like William Birkin mutilate continuously, each form stronger and harder to destroy than the last. Damage doesn't weaken them, it accelerates their evolution. The Ouroboros strain escalates still further, producing growth that can reach monstrous, even kaiju-like proportions. with hosts such as Albert Wesker displaying enhanced speed, strength, and regenerative ability while retaining intelligence. Every variant reinforces the same truth. These creations are not accidents of infection, but deliberate efforts to build life forms humans were never meant to oppose. And unlike swarm-driven threats where numbers make the difference, a Resident Evil Super BOW is often a single, unstoppable unit. Fictional encounters show that one tyrant or nemesis can rip through special forces, crush fortified resistance, and destabilize entire cities on its own. Small arms buy seconds, not victory. BOWs are often built to shrug off conventional infantry weapons. Neutralizing even one requires heavy ordnance or coordinated military-scale intervention. The BOWs of Resident Evil aren't about numbers, they're about quality over quantity. Each tyrant or nemesis is engineered to withstand damage, regenerate, and hunt with precision. Their infection rate is lower than fungal spores or parasitic swarms, but their deadliness in one-on-one encounters is unmatched. Weaknesses exist, but only in theory. Conventional weapons barely work, and heavy firepower is rare. For their engineered resilience and unstoppable presence, Resident Evil's creations stand at Tier A. Unlike other zombies, these monsters embody design intent. They combine engineered strength, resilience, and escalating mutation, leaving almost no exploitable weakness. Which is more dangerous? Millions of fragile bodies swarming through cities? Or a single super weapon designed to track you endlessly until you break? Evil Dead shifts the stakes again by introducing Deadites, demonic entities that turn death into a temporary inconvenience. Unlike zombies born from infections or radiation, Deadites are spirits unleashed through the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, able to invade both corpses and the living alike. A neighbor, a friend, or even family can become a mouthpiece for the Kadarian demon in seconds. What makes them frightening isn't a bite that spreads infection, it's the complete unpredictability of possession. There's no exposure you can trace, no incubation period, no quarantine line to hold. Survival becomes a question of when, not if, the voice in the woods points to you. Physical destruction rarely solves the problem. Severing limbs or destroying a body may slow a Deadite, but the spirit often endures, waiting for another host. Fire doesn't guarantee freedom, and even decapitation can leave the entity laughing through a ruined shell. Canon provides only a short list of reliable counters, passages read from the Necronomicon, mystical rites, or direct attacks with artifacts like the Kadarian dagger, whose blade can vaporize a Deadite outright. Without those tools, ordinary weapons amount to stalling at best. It is never the body you're fighting, but the thing driving it. This pattern aligns with real-world traditions about spirit possession and exorcism. Many cultures turn prayers, charms, or rituals to drive out what cannot be cut or burned. The Evil Dead universe takes that concept literally. The only defense is familiarity with the right words and weapons. Dismemberment buys time. Rituals end it. The Kadarian dagger, protective talismans, and even improvised wards like holy water in some continuities all underline that the Deadite threat belongs to the supernatural, not the medical category. Adding to this horror is their cruelty. A Deadite doesn't just puppet its host. It mocks, twists, and taunts with the victim's voice and memories. Former friends may sneer, goad, or recall private details before attacking, erasing any comfort in human connection. Their shape-shifting ability makes them worse still, allowing them to appear uninfected until they are close enough to strike. Even space itself holds no safety. In certain lore branches, Deadites survive the vacuum, and across alternate futures they even adapt into digital forms, spreading through malware rather than blood. This adaptability ensures that any world they reach remains permanently at risk. From fragile corpses to engineered monsters to spirits tied to forbidden books, every step up the ladder strips away another layer of what humanity can control, and that pattern reveals a brutal truth. When it comes to survival, the real countdown has never been about killing bodies. It has always been about time. Deadites rewrite the game entirely. Possession makes infection invisible, numbers unpredictable, and weaknesses nearly non-existent without specialized mystical tools. Their deadliness is sky high, and their cruelty adds a psychological edge that no other zombie threat matches. They leap from body to body, survive in space, even adapt digitally. For that adaptability and sheer inevitability, Deadites secure a permanent home in the top of Tier S. In our ranking, The Walking Dead sits in Tier F, fragile and defeatable, but still dangerous in numbers. Dying Light holds Tier B, dangerous only when the night falls. Resident Evil's BOWs and The Last of Us Cordyceps climb into Tier A, powerful enough to destabilize humanity, but not invincible. And at the very top, Halo's Flood and the Evil Dead Deadites take Tier S, the true endgame threats against which humanity has no choice. So, which of these 6 would end us first? Share your pick for the fastest apocalypse in the comments, and subscribe for more breakdowns of science fiction's deadliest scenarios.